So, hello students, welcome to the next session of the microbiology lecture discussion series. And today's topic of my discussion will be mainly focusing upon the metabolism and its types. So students, this metabolism, it's a very common term what needs to be understood, and this has been very frequently asked there as a short note. So this video I'll be mainly focusing upon as to actually what is metabolism and what are the types of metabolism. So students, metabolism in a general or a common term, just a one-line definition I would like to discuss, say that it is the entire spectrum of the life-sustaining chemical reactions what are occurring in the human cell, in the human body, or in the cell on a broader way, because in the large variety of animals, in the most of the unicellular to multicellular organisms, whatever are there, the sum total of the chemical reactions what occur within the cell, it is referred to as the metabolism. So, and what is the basic concept as to what is the actual need, why metabolism is needed. So students, I would like to emphasize, because just I have said that metabolism are the chemical reactions, particularly the life-sustaining chemical reactions which occur within a cell. So metabolism, these chemical reactions what are occurring, they are mostly catalyzed by certain enzymes, and these metabolic reactions what are taking place within the cell are very important for the normal growth, development, logical processes, the entire process for the survival. Metabolic reactions are very important, whether it be from the survival point of view, whether it be from the growth, from the development point of view, whether it be from the repair and healing, and in a much broader sense, these metabolic reactions, they are also involved in the adaptation of the organism to the external environment. So the adaptability phenomena, what is seen from the lower organisms to the higher animals, what are seen within the plant cells or the animals, whatever, that is the entire metabolic process, the metabolic chemical reactions, what are actually responsible for the sustenance of the organism. So this metabolism can be broadly subdivided into two categories, since the chemical reactions what are occurring within a cell, they can be either of the constructive process, wherever there is going to be a process called as the growth, wherever there has to take place the process of growth, the process of development, the process of repair, the process of healing, the process of reproduction. See, all these processes are actually the constructive process. In order for the growth and development, the healing, the repair, the reproduction, the survival, see, these all processes, these all chemical reactions, what are there, these are all actually the constructive processes. These are there are certain things, certain chemicals, substances needs to be formed. So the chemical reactions what are pertaining to the construction of certain things, they are referred to as the anabolism. And in the cell, there has to occur degradation of certain compounds. For example, if I consume certain kind of glucose or food, what the food is ingested by the organism, that ingested foods needs to be broken down in order to release energy. So within the cytoplasm of the cell, this breakdown of the food is going to give rise to energy. So within the within the cell, the constructive processes are also occurring, which are responsible for the growth and development, the repair and healing, whereas there are certain chemical processes which are destructive in nature, and they are also very important for the supply, the constant supply, the constant requirement of energy is fulfilled by these degradative process or the destructive process. So the entire metabolism can be broadly split into two types. One is the anabolism, where the constructive processes, the constructive chemical reactions, which lead to the formation of certain complex molecules, which are needed for growth and development, take place. And the other, that is the destructive processes or the anabolic reaction, the catabolic reaction or the destructive processes, which are responsible for the release of energy, whether it is the cellular respiration where energy is required for the survival of the organism. So the metabolism can be split into two: the constructive processes or the anabolism, and the destructive or the degradative processes, which are called as catabolism. So this video, I'll be mainly focusing upon the mechanism, the entire process, what is happening. So students, just a one-line definition for catabolism. Cata means breaking down or degradation. So during the process of catabolism, what is actually happening? It is the degradative process what is occurring. And in this degradative process, the biomolecules, what are there, they are broken down into simpler forms with a concomitant release of energy. So students, this be emphasized over here, that the entire process of the catabolism, that is the breakdown process, in this breakdown process, bigger, larger biomolecules, they are broken down into simpler ones with concomitant release of energy. So the best example to see catabolism, it is in the cellular respiration. When food is ingested by any organism, the organism needs energy for various for its survival, for various metabolic process, for its survival. So the glucose, the food what is being ingested, that has to be broken down into simpler form to provide energy. We human beings consume food and we get instant amount of instant energy is provided. So the food needs to be broken down into simpler forms to provide energy in the form of ATP, and that energy is utilized by the organism for its survival. So the best example of the catabolic process, it is the cellular respiration what is seen, where large complex glucose molecule is broken down into simpler forms, and that simpler form is ultimately going to release energy after certain steps of chemical reactions, which are basically enzyme mediated. So students, so it is a degradative process where the complex biomolecules are broken down into simpler ones with the release of energy. Now, this trapping of the energy of the complex biomolecules are either utilized in two ways. One, the energy what is being produced by the breakdown of by the breakdown during the catabolic reaction, it is either utilized for the synthesis of some for the synthesis of the biomolecules what are required for the growth and development, or it is required to provide energy to the organism. So students, this fact needs to be emphasized, that the energy what is liberated during the catabolic reactions, it is either utilized to provide energy for the sustainability of the organism, or this energy is also utilized for the synthesis of another complex molecules, another complex biomolecules, which are required for the growth and development. So the entire catabolism reactions can be summed up into three stages. The first stage, it is the conversion of complex molecules into the building blocks, where the polysaccharides, they are converted into monosaccharides, the simpler form. The proteins, they are converted into their building blocks, such as amino acids. And the lipids, they are converted into the simpler forms in the form of free fatty acids and glycerol. So students, in the first step of the catabolism, it is actually the conversion of the complex biomolecules into their building blocks. So the first step mostly occurs outside the cell. So students, this fact needs to be emphasized. Whatever the carbohydrate, the proteins, the polysaccharides, what are being ingested by the organism, it is mostly broken down into the simpler, the building blocks, in the form of monosaccharides, proteins, lipids, or free fatty acids. They are being broken down into this these simpler forms, mostly outside the cell. Now, in the second stage, what we find is, from the simpler substances, from the simpler forms, what are formed, the formation of the simple intermediates are going to take place. So in the second step, what we are finding is these building blocks, what are formed by the breakdown of the complex molecules, that is from the polysaccharides, the monosaccharides, from the proteins, the amino acids, and the lipids, they break down to give free fatty acids and glycerol. This took place outside the cell. Now, these simpler forms, these building blocks of these complex molecules, they are further broken down into the simpler intermediates, such as the glucose, the very common, the very famous example, it is about the glucose. So in the glycolysis, the glucose molecule is ultimately converted to pyruvate. The fate of the glucose is ultimately in the glycolysis, up till in the glycolysis process, the fate of the glucose is ultimately the production of pyruvate. So these simpler, the monosaccharides, what are formed in the first step, they are being further these converted into the more simpler forms, such as in the simpler intermediates, what are the pyruvate and the acetyl-CoA. And finally, in the third step, what we find is the final oxidation of the acetyl coenzyme A. What is being produced? Acetyl coenzyme A, it is a 2-carbon compound. So the final oxidation of the acetyl coenzyme A is occurring, and that is going to release carbon dioxide and water. So the complex molecules firstly broken down into the building blocks. Later, in the second step, the building blocks are further converted into the much simpler intermediates. And finally, this much simpler intermediate, that is the pyruvate and the acetyl-CoA, in the final step, they are going to get converted into the final oxidation is going to occur, and the carbon dioxide and water is released. So apart from them, the carbon dioxide and water, what is released, it is liberated and the intermediates, what are the energy, what is released, it is mostly by the conversion of the NAD enzyme, that is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, into reducing the NAD enzyme into NADH with the release of large amount of energy. So students, this was all the 3 steps in a short nutshell I have discussed about the stages what occur in the catabolism, and the striking distinguishing feature what needs to be emphasized very importantly over here, it is that the Krebs cycle, it is the common metabolic pathway involved in the final oxidation of all energy rich molecules, whether it be the carbohydrates, whether it be the proteins or fats. So students, this fact needs to be emphasized, the common metabolic pathway for all energy rich molecules, whether it be carbohydrates, proteins or fats, it is the Krebs cycle. And this acetyl-CoA is finally oxidized to carbon dioxide and water. So this was all about the catabolism, where the degradation, the breaking down of the complex biomolecules are occurring within the cellular machinery, within the cellular cytoplasm, and energy is released by the reduction of the enzyme NAD into NADH with the release of large amount of energy in the form of ATP or GTP. Now, looking at the anabolism, as I've already said, that these anabolic reactions are actually the constructive reactions are occurring in the cell. So anabolic reactions, these are the biosynthetic reactions what are basically involved in the formation of complex molecules from simpler ones. So as I've said in the catabolism, there the degradation of the complex biomolecules are occurring into the simpler ones. In contrast to catabolism, in anabolism, the complex molecules are getting synthesized within the cell from the simpler ones. Now, and for the synthesis of a large variety of complex molecules, the starting materials, what are mostly seen in most of the organisms, they are basically the 3, that is the pyruvate, the acetyl coenzyme A, and the intermediates of the Krebs cycle. So students, during the process of anabolism, the complex molecules, what are mostly seen, synthesis of a large variety of starting materials, for a large variety of starting materials, these are the basic enzymes, that is the pyruvate, CoA, the acetyl of the Krebs cycle. So this anabolic reactions, the basic, the starting materials for synthesis of the most of the complex reactions, it is actually the pyruvate, the acetyl CoA, and the intermediates of Krebs cycle. And besides the availability of the precursors, the anabolic reactions are very much dependent upon the supply ATP or the GTP. Without these ATP, the adenosine triphosphate and the guanosine triphosphate, these energy-rich molecules, without their availability, the anabolic reactions won't be able to carry out, won't be able to be done. So students, this was a short discussion. This was a short discussion about the metabolism. And students, if you are visiting my channel for the first time, and for those who haven't subscribed yet, students, this was in short about the metabolism and its subtypes I have discussed. Students, for those students who have visited my channel for the first time and haven't subscribed yet, please go do and subscribe my channel. And if you want further updates of my videos, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And students, it's a request from my side that whatever topics what you find difficult in understanding, you are most welcome to comment me in the comment section. I'll be taking